acting. So we can get going. Brenda, can you hear me? Brenda did not respond, so I don't know that he can hear me.
If you're speaking to me, I can't hear you.
Can you hear us now?
Now we have a low volume with an echo.
We're working on it.
How's that?
No.
We have no echo, but still kind of low volume. It's hard to hear what you're saying.
Test? How's that?
Can you hear us now?
Can hear you, but it does seem like it's lower volume than normal.
Okay. Checking on it. All right. Does this sound better?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Can it go higher?
No, you're a little bit low volume.
Okay.
We're still working. Hold on.
Now we have an echo. I can hear you okay, so I would say we could proceed.
Okay, I think we've solved our sound problem. We got a little bit of a late start because the room was in use when we got here. So let's get rolling. It is 6:30.
Recording in progress.
It is 6:33. And it is Wednesday, February 12th, regular meeting of the Norwich Selectboard. I'm Pam Smith, the chair. I'm joined here in Tracy Hall by Mary Layton, vice chair, and Marcia Calloway. Online, we have Roger Arnold and our town manager, Brennan Duffy. Priscilla Vincent will not be joining us this evening. She is not feeling well, so she has decided that she is going to take tonight off. So with that, let's get started. The first item on our agenda is a discussion of the agenda. Would someone like to make a motion?
I move to approve the agenda as presented.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Okay. Is there any discussion, any comments or questions? Seeing none, Mary, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Marcia?
No?
Roger?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. 3 yes, 1 no. Okay. Next item on the agenda is the chair's report, and the only thing I have to report is meeting with the town manager to go over the agenda for this evening's meeting. The next thing on the agenda is public comments for items not on the agenda. Are there any public comments? Seeing none, we'll move on to item number 4, which is a presentation by Rick Brigham of Sullivan and Powers on the fiscal year 24 audit. So Rick, I see you're here with us.
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Great. You want me to just dive right in?
Sure.
Okay. So last week I had a meeting with the treasurer, Barry, and Brennan. Kind of went over everything in the audit, did a real deep dive into stuff. So tonight what I was hoping to do is give the board an overview of what I think the salient points in the audit are. And if you have any questions at the end, we can jump onto those then.
Okay,
so there's
great.
a lot. There's a lot of information in this. This is like 68 pages, tons of information. But But my responsibility as your auditor is really just pages 1 through 4. The rest of this, the financial statement piece, obviously is the responsibility of management, the board, Brennan, Barry, her staff, of all the numbers that get created throughout the year within the accounting system, all the policies that are set, all the controls that are in place. My job is to review the information in the audit, in my audit procedures, and to come to an opinion on the financial statements within that are attached here. So if you're looking at pages 1 through 4, basically you have 3 choices of an opinion. You can have an adverse opinion, you can have a qualified opinion, or you can have an unqualified opinion. Basically, an adverse opinion means these financial statements are not fairly stated. A qualified opinion means they're fairly stated except for something. And an unqualified is a clean opinion. Is looking through your opinion, you basically have one qualification. It's related to the transfer station. I think we talked a little bit about this last year, related to the controls there and making sure that if there's any cash collected, that there's some controls in there to make sure completeness of revenues is booked appropriately, and that you have the controls in process to make sure that's happening. So we could talk a little bit more about that when we look at the findings, but that's basically the only qualification is really related to completeness of revenues in the transfer station. Looking at page 5 and 6, this is what we call the government-wide financials. I don't spend a lot of time on this because most of my clients don't look at this a whole lot, but this is basically taking all the funds of the town, throwing in the fixed assets, throwing in the debt, and this is what your financial statements would look like if you were a business. And so this, kind of goes down and shows you the assets and liabilities, typical balance sheet on the first page, and more of a unusual kind of statement of activities or income statement on the second. But I don't spend a lot of time on that unless somebody has any specific questions. Obviously, the main focus when I'm going through my audits is looking at the general fund. So we're going to jump to page 7. And so again, this is a balance sheet, a snapshot in time of what your assets and liabilities look like at June 30, 2024. So you look at your assets and all the assets there, liabilities. We subtract off from the assets, the liabilities and the deferred inflows. That leaves you with what's left, the fund balances. And most places like to look at what's my unassigned fund balance. And your unassigned fund balance is $1,266,680, which seems to be healthy and in a good place. If you're looking in the total fund balance, obviously $3,474,643. And if you're looking at how you got from last year's fund balance of $2,926,05, you'd be looking on page 8, and you'd see the revenues and expenses that went in and out during the year to take that 2,920 up to the 3,474,643. The other column in those two pages is the non-major funds. So basically all the non-major funds are in the back schedules. That's all the different things like the capital project funds, the special revenue funds, granite bench fund, records restoration, all the different funds. They total up from pages 56 to 63 to come to this these totals on pages 8 and 9. Again, same thing, the assets and liabilities related to all those different funds. Pages 12 through 36, if you're looking for a deeper dive into what are our capitalization policies, what are our depreciation policies, what are our fund balances, and what can things be used for, what transfers were made and why. These are what we call the notes to the financial statement, and they provide a lot of great detailed information that if you're looking for information, like I said, when you're looking at the balance sheet, income statements, or fund balances and you want more information, these notes give you a lot of detail. I'm not going to go through these tonight because it would take too long, but just know that information's there if you're looking for a much deeper dive on stuff. If we're looking at pages 37 through 53, this is your general fund budget and actual. You've probably been seeing this on a regular basis during the year, getting reports from Barry and the finance staff on how you're doing during your budgets and actuals and overages. I kind of just whipped through it this afternoon looking at things that, stuck out to me. The revenues looked pretty well in line with budget, except most of you're a little over your budget because of some unexpected grants and some interest income that was well above budget. And then kind of looking through the other pages, it looks like a lot of, again, and I think we've seen this in past years where positions were budgeted for and then weren't filled. And then there were positions that were filled. Like I know finance had 2 people last year during the end of the last year audit. So you're kind of looking at some wage variances there. But again, most of the variances relate to wages or sand, which I think was well over budget or well under budget actually. And so there was nothing there that struck me. You'll see on page 50, there was a FEMA grant expense where you spent $123,000 with nothing budgeted. So those are the big amounts that kind of get to the variance at the very end where you're looking at, you know, a budget was balanced at 0 and your actual profit was $615,000, which is $615,000 over budget. And that's how you get there. But all the different pieces are in there to look at. Again, looking at pages 56 and 50 through 63, this is what I'd mentioned earlier. These are the small funds. They're broken up into a couple categories, special revenues and capital projects. Those other pages that are behind pages 56 and 57 will total up to the totals in 56 and 57 and give you the, again, same kind of thing, balance sheet and income statement for each of those funds, seeing how the fund did for the year and where it ended up in fund balance. Nothing in there struck me as something we had to talk about tonight. As part of our audit, one of the requirements is to talk about, is to communicate to the board any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies that we noticed during the audit. So the first one we talked about is the transfer station revenues being a material weakness and trying to make sure, you know, one of the things I like to see is no more money, cash being collected at a transfer station. I like to see just credit cards being used so that we can make sure that folding green is, you know, not in the equation of where controls can be circumvented. So we like to see, you know, we'd love to see just, you know, and I know I see a lot of my other clients headed in that direction with just taking credit card payments or at least putting in some sort of controls, having a cash register, having a sign customers must take receipts, cameras, those kind of controls that could minimize any sort of risks that a cash collection site like that might have. Accounts payable, we found a few payables that had to get booked at year end, and whenever we have an adjustment in our audit process, we have to mention that in the findings. We've discussed those with Barry and the staff so to prevent that from happening next year. Same kind of thing with some grant receivables and deferreds on page 67. We had a couple of adjustments that related to those. So again, having those adjustments, we have to report those in the findings. And then the other couple things we had was we just believe, you know, you guys are great about authorizing invoices and having board warrants be signed. So if there are journal entries within the accounting system where you're posting from one account to another or booking receivables, we just think it's a good idea to have journal entries reviewed by somebody and signed off as documented that somebody else has reviewed journal entries. So we'd like to see that in place for all journal entries that are done to the books. And then the last point was netting of revenues expenses. There were a couple adjustments where we had to do where certain revenues got netted down for the expense. So it netted to a lower number, but we want to show the gross revenues and expenses related to all the different grants and other kinds of revenues that come in. So we grossed those back up and just made a point about that. Other communications required. We encountered no difficulties in dealing with staff or management. We had no disagreements with staff or management. We had no consultations with other auditors, and all entries we proposed were posted by management. So overall, I was very pleased with how the audit went. I know there was a transition last year coming off the old finance director with Barry coming in for her first full year. But overall, I think she learned a lot throughout the year and during the audit process again this year. So I would expect that next year we'll even have a much cleaner audit and with hopefully no findings or other recommendations that need to be in there. We've discussed them all with her and the treasurer and the manager last week. So I feel like we're at a good place to get a lot of that dealt with. Does anybody have any specific questions?
Mary, go ahead.
I think one of the suggestions was to have Town of Norwich create an accounting manual so that everyone would know what the procedures are.
Yeah,
Uh,
so,
But
Yeah.
if I understand correctly, a part of that process would be asking everyone what they do now. But just in contrast to that, are there templates or, other manuals that could be used as a guide so that it's,
that's a great question. So what I'll tell you is I have one of the other points that we probably mentioned in there is having a control manual. I have great examples of control manuals that other towns have created and used, and that way you're not recreating the wheel.
Exactly.
Accounting procedures manuals, I've got a couple. I wouldn't say they're wonderful because they're almost like cookbooks. I turn on the computer, I go to the screen, so they become a little bit more like specific to the
granular.
town. Yeah.
Yeah, they're too granular.
Yes,
But perhaps
exactly.
So in your comments in the letter to the select board, were you referring to an internal control manual or an accounting manual?
Both.
Or
Yes, I'm pretty
okay.
sure.
So
let me-
one's the encyclopedia and the other's the operating manual kind of thing.
Exactly.
Right?
And for
Okay.
me, the control manuals, well, it's important for two reasons. If somebody leaves a position and you need to pay bills, you need to know how to do that. That's what the accounting manual does. What, as an auditor coming in or as a grantor coming in, wanting to know what kind of controls you have over segregation of duties, who signs warrants, who signs invoices, and having that all documented is just a wonderful thing to have in place. And that way, if there's a problem with a control, you can go in and tweak the manual or adjust things. And it's kind of a living, breathing document, but both of them are important for different reasons.
And one should map onto the other, correct?
They absolutely would be great if they did. 100%.
Thank you.
Yep.
Marcia, go ahead.
We actually, 2 years ago, started something like an internal control manual. We sat down with the treasurer and the finance officer at the time. And so that thing is a germ document that does exist.
Okay, I'd love to see what you have. And like I said, I can show you what I have for other towns, just so we're all on the same page as to what, because the feds, when they come in and want, they're going to do monitorings and review grants and that kind of stuff. They like it in a certain format of the COSO sponsoring committee and organization, that they give a pretty specific format on how they want those controls to look. So I think looking at mine or looking at examples of mine might help you take your document and move it forward.
Super. Rick, could you send that to Brennan so he can distribute it to the board?
I'd be glad to do that.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions? Eric?
Just in thinking about the Department of Public Works, and perhaps you've seen this in other towns, going beyond the cash for services like, throwing out your construction waste or your household trash and so forth, where for the trash we use a coupon, and for the construction it's often just cash, which, I can see where that is just, it's an invitation. Well, it's not an invitation, but it's too loose, and that should tighten up. But in addition to that, I'm also wondering about if other towns also do things like inventory their chainsaws and tools and so forth, like all the stuff that's used in their Department of Works, and also, just keep track of the sand and materials that are used. Do you see that, or is that a concern anywhere?
I guess I will tell you that I've seen that vary from town to town. Places where I go, some towns are too small where they don't have a lot of things sitting around. Then I'll go to some bigger towns or cities where they have culverts and they have all this stuff, and they have tools and trucks, and obviously the big stuff's accounted for. The big stuff's like usually accounted for, the trucks and the things over 5,000 as part of your capitalization policy. But there is a lot of things related to tools or
a lot of little stuff.
Yeah, that depending on what the board wants, what DPW wants, inventorying that on every other year or every year basis might make sense to kind of make sure you're not having any loss there as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, I have a few. Transfer station was on my list of questions. I think we have an incredible staff there right now, and I trust them implicitly. But I think we do need to tighten up our controls there. And at one point, we talked about going to checks only, but it hasn't happened. And we were going to look into whether we could put a credit card station there. We need a phone line, and I don't know that we have a reliable phone line, but I agree with you that with the C&D or some of these other things, they do take cash.
They do take cash.
And I know, I spoke with our transfer station manager, and he showed me his system, and he invented it himself, and it's wonderful. He's doing a great job. But, it should be something that anybody who steps into that job has something to follow, and someone that we don't have to worry about whether we trust them or not. Also, tonight we have two requests, Rick, for moving some money from the general fund to a reserve fund to reimburse the reserve fund for monies that were spent. So these grants are coming in as reimbursements, and it's going back to the reserve fund. And I'm wondering, is that the proper procedure, or should the staff be doing this in a different way?
I think it really depends on, I mean, I know, I kind of understand what you're talking about, but a lot of the circumstances of what you're talking about are quite different. Whether if you're saying, oh, we got a grant into the general fund that was helping to pay for something that was out of one of the reserve funds, and we wanted to move it in there. I get that. And I think that makes sense. Or you could have originally billed the grant through the special revenue fund directly. And that way, all the money, when it came in, came back into the reserve, and you didn't have to transfer the money. A lot of places do it strictly for budgeting, for knowing where they were budgeting numbers, where they were budgeting transfers. And so that if they're really trying to map everything through the general fund. And I think that's probably what I'm seeing in your place, is that is what I think is happening, why you're having to do those transfers rather than just treating the capital project fund or the special revenue fund as a direct recipient of the grant or the grant proceeds.
Okay. On the question of the general journal review, I read the finance director's response, and she said that the town manager will be reviewing these. No disrespect to our town manager, but I just wonder if we shouldn't be having the town treasurer, who has finance experience, reviewing them for appropriateness rather than the town manager. What you're thinking about that?
Ideally on that, the only thing I will say is I go to a lot of different places where, a town manager or administrative assistant's abilities in accounting and understanding journal entries is good enough to do that. I can't speak to Brennan and his experience in that, but yes, what the ideal point of it is trying to make sure that somebody who has financial experience is looking at them. A lot of the entries that you're doing aren't terribly complicated. They're booking a receivable, booking some payables, setting up accrued payroll, and a lot of them are happening at year end. So, but it is important to have somebody who at least understands what those transactions are doing.
Okay. Yeah, I think that in our case, it would be the treasurer. Also, back on page 25, you talked about compensated absences payable, and I brought this up in previous years. It says we have $66,358 that is payable to our employees. Typically, that's taken when they retire or resign and they have any accumulated time. And we did see an instance where when our town clerk retired, it put us over budget to pay that out. So I'm wondering, should we be keeping some kind of a reserve fund or some kind of accounting where we set that money aside so that when it's payable, we draw that fund down rather than just taking it out of the general fund? And
well, I'm going to give you
overspending?
my first blush on that is 66,000 is a lot of money, but it's not anywhere close to like what a lot of my towns and cities have as far as what they built. And And most of the time, what you have in fund balance as the town right now of the, the I think it was 1.2, almost 1.3 million would be even if everybody left and you had to pay them all off, it wouldn't be that severe a hit even to your fund balance. So, I mean, you could certainly put some sort of reserve fund aside or put some cash aside to be able to pay those. But I think right now, looking at what I'm looking at, I wouldn't see it as a huge red flag or something that needs to happen. But that's strictly up to board policy and what they want.
Okay. Yeah, typically we have surpluses, but hopefully we wouldn't find a situation where it put us in a deficit. And
Yeah.
my last question is on the difference between setting up a designated fund or a special revenue fund. When we were putting together our town warrant, we talked about the opioid settlement funds that we're getting in, and should we put that on the town warrant? And there was some confusion as to whether we should set that up as a designated fund or if it should be a special revenue fund. And I was wondering if you could explain to us the difference between the two and how they're established. Who sets those up?
Usually that's kind of discussed at, it can start at the board level or it can be finances doing it directly. But typically what we see is, okay, you want to fund reserves for capital projects. That's a capital project reserve. Or you might get a grant that you've got to spend specifically on these purposes. That could be a capital project or special revenue. The opioid one, and forgive me, I know it's not a lot of money, so I can't remember if there's any agreement that's making you spend it on a certain thing, but I don't think that's the case. So I don't think it necessarily has to be a special fund or a designated fund. That could go probably right in the general fund. But off the top of my head, I can't remember exactly the opioid settlements and what they say you have to spend it on. But I thought my recollection was that it was pretty free and clear money.
It probably is, but we had a request from a resident to consider putting it into a fund for opioid treatment and prevention.
Mm-hmm.
And so the question was, if we are creating a designated fund, that is created by the voters. They have to approve that.
Yep.
If it's a special revenue fund, is that something that the board sets up? Or does that have to go to the voters as well?
I would say, I'm not sure the legal, because I'm not a lawyer, but an accountant. But I will tell you, it's a variety of levels of what I see of my clients. Is I've seen where boards have set up all funds, all new funds, and I've seen where finance departments set up all new funds and then run them by the board, or at least discuss it with them. Say, hey, we did this. We got a new grant in for this, this reappraisal. We got this grant in for this, and we're going to track it through this separate fund, and giving them an idea of what they're trying to do. So I've kind of seen it all over the board.
Okay, all right, thank you. Yeah, I think that was everything that I had. Is there anyone else who would like to ask any questions? Mary?
Yes, Rick, could you explain the difficulty with, I guess it's posting the correct amounts to pay for an item or a service in a given fiscal year? Can you explain what the difficulty was with that? That was going to hear.
Yeah, so sometimes I think it can be getting an invoice late. Sometimes it can be that somebody just read the wrong dates or thought it was for a service that was in July rather than June. And those are typically what we find when we're dealing with payable cutoff issues. Is there's typically an invoice that said when they first looked at it first blush, they thought it was for work that was done in July, but when we come in and audit it, like, well, you can see the service dates are back here and it's for June, so we need to push that back into the period which it was in, which the service was provided. And then the other tricky part is sometimes you ordered those computers in June, and that everybody wants to put those back into June. But guess what? If they didn't come in until July, I can't book those back to June because that's not in accordance with GAAP. So like just ordering something doesn't make it a payable at the end of the year. It's when the goods were received or the services were performed. That's what dictates cutoff of payables.
Right. So like, for instance, when we order police cars, they take a long time for the supply chain to chug
Yes.
along, and then they need to be outfitted. So, I mean, it could be years.
Yep.
We put the order through, but meantime, we have to budget for those police cars as well. So I imagine because of the budgeting process, perhaps that creates some of the surplus that we're always worried that we're not, or not.
Well, it can, but sometimes you
Because
use
it's in a
your,
reserve.
sometimes you, part of the fund balance is if you look at, there's several categories of fund balance. Some of them are like assigned where the board has said, hey, we didn't get spend the money on those police cruisers. So we're going to assign some of the fund balance for the police cruisers. And so
That
that
would be in
will
a
look,
reserve.
well,
Yeah.
no, it would just be a portion. If you look back at the fund balance on page 7 of the general fund, you'll see there's different categories: non-spendable, restricted, committed, assigned, and unassigned. So it could go in it could be in those assigned funds. If you said, hey, we had these police cruisers we didn't get in, we want to put those into assigned, the board would simply vote to assign the fund balance for the police cruisers in the future. And that way you can always get back to your unassigned is, hey, that's really our unassigned. That's not something we're going to be spending.
All right. Thank you.
Yep.
So on the unassigned on that page, 1,266,680, that also includes what we call fund, I think it's 51 or 50, for emergencies. And your last audit said that really was not specific enough for it to be considered a reserve fund.
Right. Well, again, if rainy day funds really aren't true reserves according to GAAP that you can set up a separate fund within your QuickBook, within your NEMRIC accounting system. And that way you guys can track it. We can track it for potentially assigned or unassigned. But when you roll up that fund to a financial report in accordance with GAAP and GASB standards, then you have to roll it up into the general fund if it doesn't meet the true definition of a special revenue fund and a capital project fund.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. Any other questions? Marcia?
So do you have any advice as we embark on the trade wars and we're trying to do business? How is this going to impact us in terms of our accounting, do you think? If we order things, we can't get it, we just go by that rule, payable when it's received, or
well,
when the service...
unfortunately, the whatever happens within the economy and how things shake out that way won't have any change to GAAP or GASB standards. So in accordance, you can always do anything, but if it's not in accordance with GASB standards or GAAP, then I have to have it in either opinion modification or, and I know you guys are trying to avoid that at all costs, so that we really kind of have to follow the rule of the letter of the law. So unless they change that, which I don't see that happening, no matter what happens in the trade imbalances, I don't see that being something where they're going to amend or change the principles on it.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? Okay, Cheryl, you want to come up to the table? Sure. Address your questions?
Carolyn Berg, I'm treasurer. A great review was had. I appreciate Rick getting together with us a couple weeks ago. But right on the topic that you were just mentioning, what about encumbrances, Rick? If we had a policy, or part of our policy is to encumber, I know there's some language in the policy that sort of gives guidance as to when it gets recorded, what year. Is that?
Again, that's just a general disclosure within the financial statement that you've encumbered the balance. It's almost like an assigned fund balance. But as far as changing how you book a payable, that doesn't change that.
Okay. So I had a couple of comments I wanted to offer up, and the different reports. I've got this letter without a page number, but it is the opinion letter, or no, it's the letter of referring to deficiencies, etc. And in it is the next to the last page. An incomplete accounting system was discussed, Rick.
Yep.
Which document? That's the schedule of deficiencies in internal control. That's what that one is. And I wanted to comment on the Cemetery Commission Fund and the trustees of public funds, which are not currently under general ledger control. This was the case back during prior finance department processes and town managers. But during the time, there was a time when it got changed, and we were told that we could no longer have these managed by the finance department. It was working well, I thought, and requires a few more reconciliations, but I just want the board to know that I support that in this comment being made, and would like to see that go back into the town's finance office and the general ledger work. The next page and last page discusses the grant management database and tax abatements. And it was my understanding that we had a part of a position to manage the grant database. And I was wondering if that is available or is it not available? It didn't seem like you found that there was one. Is that correct?
That's correct. If we found one, it was probably incomplete. And so there probably wasn't able to have all there's a lot of things that can go into a grants database. When are your reports due? What are your compliance requirements? What is grant terms? What are the expenses? I mean, there's a lot of factors that would go into that other than just listing the grants.
Right. And I thought we had a position that the assistant town manager position was created for managing that. So I'm hopeful that gets resolved. And lastly, on tax abatements, I noticed you changed the wording a little bit there, Rick, after we talked.
Yeah.
Change to what?
Well, the draft, Mary, that was sent out for Brennan and Barry and me to review before the final document.
This is final, so you're saying.
Yeah, this is the final wording. In the other wording, it implied that minutes weren't available, and the discussion ensued about the fact that there's a deliberative session, so you don't find the abatement decision in minutes. The letter that's written is the official document, but I'm certain we give those to the finance office to create those payments. And I'm still surprised that you didn't find
and
that.
you might, but there might have been some sort of transition, but we've asked for that document like 3 or 4 different times and didn't ever get it. So that's why we left that in there. So.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Yeah. In your opinion letter, I guess this was what this one is. The MD&A, I know we used to do that. So is that something that would be the responsibility of the town manager, the select board? Who do you think is it a combination of?
I think it would start with Barry, and it would work it could work off to the board, or it could work off to the manager, and a little bit of, I see towns where one person is pretty much in charge of the whole thing. I see towns where it's a group effort. So, but
Okay.
I do think it's a great thing to put back into place. I think when you were having transition in your finance department, you just, you got away from it. But I think now that you've got some stability there and you've got good communication going with the board, treasurer, and finance department now, I think that's a good thing to put back in.
Yeah, I agree. That's what I would think. Lastly, I know during the audit, I received an email regarding the collectability of delinquent taxes and the properties relating to those delinquent taxes in the report. We do have a policy. I'm not sure you've seen. I hope you have. If you haven't, I'm happy to share it with you. But in there, it does discuss, and this policy is dated 2020. Mary and Roger were a part of the select board at the time that signed this policy, discussing what should be a file for each of the delinquent tax accounts.
What's the policy?
And the policy is tax collection policy and procedure. Thank you.
The master of financial policies.
Okay.
Actually, it isn't. It's under tax collection now.
Okay.
It's carved out.
So if you go on to the website under Select Board, there's a link for select board policies, and it's one of the 20 or so policies
That are
that are there. Master financial is one of those 20,
individual.
but the tax collection is its own policy list.
Okay, thank you.
So it just guidelines the delinquent tax process. And so when I received this request, as a lister, I responded that I wouldn't be the one to check with on that because we don't do that type of evaluation of properties in Norwich, but that the delinquent tax collector would set up a file for each and track and record the payments and have communication with each of these delinquent property taxpayers. So I would like to refer you to that maybe for another year that you could.
I'll be glad to look at it, but again, I'm not sure why that request would have come to you if you're not the delinquent tax collector. So I can't answer that. 'Cause that
No,
probably- yeah.
I responded with the,
Yeah.
to check with Brennan and his records, but I just want to point out that that is a pretty thorough policy that got worked on. Took some
Yep.
real work, and Claudette worked hard on that. So that's just some of my other comments about the report that I'm just following up with you in a public meeting, so it's on the record.
Yep.
Thank you.
Great, thank you, Cheryl. Any other questions for Rick? Any other comments?
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I
Thank
think
you very
this,
much.
I think this does show the benefit of consistent management.
Absolutely.
Okay. All
Thank you
right.
very much, everybody. Have a good meeting.
Thank you. Have a good evening. Okay, moving on. Number 5 is a request for transfer to Culvert Fund number 54. We have an email from Chris Kaufman to Brennan requesting that we move some grant funds from the general fund over to fund number 54. Are there any questions or comments on this before we go to a motion? I don't see any. Would someone like to make the motion?
I move to approve the transfer of the following funds from the general fund to fund number 54, Culvert Fund. $27,500 received from 2024 grants and aid reimbursement and $20,000 from 2024 Better Back Roads reimbursement.
Thank you. Is there a second? Second. Thank you. Any comments? Discussion? Seeing none, Mary, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Marcia? Yes. Roger?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Okay. All right, the next item on the agenda is the Beaver Meadow Road Shoulder and Culvert Project Contract Award and Expenditure Request. So we've approved an RFP process a few meetings ago, and now we have the results. Brennan, did you want to address this before the board?
Well, Chris Kaufman is also on, but I guess just briefly, I think the memo is pretty clear. So we're basically at the point now where we would like to sign a contract with a contractor to do the work, and we have two pieces of this. One is the actual shoulder improvement work, and one is replacing a culvert that is in need of replacement. So that's why this has two different designated funds attached to the request for the funding.
Okay. All right, does anyone have any questions? Seeing none, would someone like to make a motion?
I move to authorize the town manager to contract with Waters Excavation, Inc. in the amount of $58,152.78 for the Beaver Meadow Road Shoulder and Culvert project. Funding for this project will be $22,645.28 from fund number 54 Culvert Fund and $35,507.50 from fund number 27 Sidewalk Fund, with reimbursement to fund number 54 Culvert Fund of $18,116.22 coming from a VTrans Grants and Aid grant, as outlined in the February 5th, 2025 email from the town manager.
Second.
Okay, thank you. Any comments or questions or discussion before we vote? Seeing none, Mary, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Marcia?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
And I'm a yes, 4 yes. Okay. Next item on our agenda is an addendum to the FEMA Culvert project with Hammond Engineering.
Hammond.
Yeah, I'll just add, there's a D at the end of the,
Oh,
Hammond.
okay,
I know Everett.
okay. Don't know where I got it that there was no D, but that's okay. All right, so this is a request to increase the contract with Hammond Engineering by $10,920. Does anyone have any questions or comments on this? Mary?
What fund does it come from?
Oh.
Culvert fund, or what's the funding source?
Yeah, we didn't,
Well, the funding source will eventually be a FEMA reimbursement. So I would say, yeah, probably this would be a Culvert fund that would be the upfront money, and then the reimbursement will come from the FEMA program.
Is it necessary to name the Culvert fund for a nice clean accounting process?
yeah, I should have looked back to see where we, put
Yeah,
that before.
Chris, maybe you can weigh
Seven.
in here
Active on that.
on the original. So this is basically a change order from the original agreement with Hammond Engineering. So I would think wherever we had originally taken that money would be the same source, but I can't
Because
recall.
because this is an engineering study, we might have taken it out of 51, which is the operational development fund, but I'm not sure. I didn't think to look back and see which fund that was taken out of. But before we even get to that, I guess my concern about anything to do with FEMA is the volatility that we're seeing with FEMA at the federal level right now. And all funding for FEMA was frozen. And I'm hearing reports that some funds are not being released as ordered by the courts. So I am very concerned about this town taking on these expenses with no absolute guarantee that we would get refunded. Where if FEMA is terminated, which is some of the conversation that's happening in Washington, D.C. right now, we could be on the hook for all of these dollars and not get a reimbursement. So I'm very concerned about that and wonder if we should be hesitating.
So if I
Marcia?
may,
Marcia put her hand up. I'm gonna,
I defer because I was just going to make
All
a
right.
comment, but he has knowledge.
all right, Brennan, go ahead.
well, obviously, we did look into this. Chris Kaufman researched this with our state level FEMA funding resources. They have basically said they are moving forward with all of these grants with the assumption that FEMA will not be dissolved. So that is a basis for why we would be looking to move forward with these projects. We basically have a timing window, as you recall. So we are actually going out to bid right now. We have the deadline of having these completed by October 2025. So again, nothing is clear at the moment about some of these new political twists, but I would assume that we're going to move forward with this and we're going to be reimbursed. I don't think there's any logical way we could just halt things on the town side at this point, this far along.
Well, we could be risking $2 million and, that's very concerning. Marcia?
With painful experience with the last administration of this administration, you just can't count on anything that's floated. And I think we're already into this and we have to go forward.
with the understanding that we could spend $2 million and not get reimbursed.
I think we will get reimbursed. Obviously, I don't know, but I think we don't really have a choice. This happened. This is an environmental disaster, and we're going to have more of them, but we're already down this path. And we're, in terms of administrations and courts, we're pretty close. If September is the date that we could be finishing this. So I think, I don't see that we have a choice.
Well, the other problem is if the government is only funded through March 14, and so you have to hope that there'll be some FEMA funding coming after March 14.
How many times have we been here?
Myself, never. So I'm just very concerned, and I don't want to see the town put at risk for not getting reimbursed for these projects. Mary?
I would actually like to have, perhaps Brennan can ask Chris if he's on. I would like to have a fund named for this. If, depending on, there's the larger issues of, federal chaos, but there's also this motion right here, and it doesn't name the funding source. So I'm still back to that. I don't feel I got a straight answer or a specific answer.
Right. Or we could just say that it would come from the same fund as the original contract that was signed with Hammond. And then we could look up what that is. I do apologize. I usually research these things, and it did not occur to me that there was no funding source here. When did we do this? Does anybody remember?
Is Chris on? Could he say something about this? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm here.
That's okay.
Yeah.
With Brennan.
Hello.
Okay, Brennan.
Yes, Chris, do you recall when we signed, when the board approved this contract initially?
Or what fund was?
Even the month?
Can I get that information? I just don't want to throw out a month or something. But I know obviously we had the original approval and we had a fund dedicated for this. I believe it was that FEMA number fund. I can just double check that and get back with you. I just need to pull up the information, and I should be able to have that pretty quick.
Yeah, this should have come with one of that normally comes with a request for funding, citing the fund and the current balance. And I missed that was not there for us. Just looking back to see if I can see it very quickly here where we did that. Maybe if I look at agendas real quick, I can see those.
Are you still there? Can you
Yeah,
hear me? Okay.
yeah.
I believe I'm looking at my emails, and I have the select board. You approved it in end of June 2024.
End of June, huh? Okay, let me just look at that agenda real quick.
Yeah, I'm looking up the information here as well. I'm sorry. Sorry about the confusion.
Thank you for looking.
Yeah.
I'm seeing,
No, I think it was, my notes say May 22nd. Does that sound right to anybody?
Yeah, May 13th, I have it here.
So it's the May 22nd meeting.
You're right, Marcia.
So-
May 22nd, DPW bids for engineering services.
Yeah.
Recommended from Fund 01-5-703-703.
703. Thank you. Yeah, I was just looking at that too. Yeah,
Can you-
that's what it was. Yeah.
Repeat that for the motion. This number.
01-5-703-703.
703-703.
Yes.
So 01-5-703-703. Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, you're gonna put that. It should be in the amount of 10,920 coming from fund or coming from account.
Yes.
Okay, so read it again, Mary. I move to approve.
Okay. I move to approve the change order for Hammond Engineering in the amount of $10,920 from fund number 01-5-703-703 to provide additional bid support as outlined in the January 30th, 2025 email from the town manager.
Thank you.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Okay. Any further discussion? Questions or comments? Seeing none, Mary, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Marcia?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
And I'm a no. Okay. Moving along. That was number 7. We're now on number 8. Replenishment of Fund 32 Citizen Assistance Fund. We don't have anything in the packet on this. Brendan, you want to speak to this issue?
So this was a topic that came up at the last meeting, and I think there was kind of agreement of the board that this would be reestablished so that we were replenishing the fund, but it was a little unclear as to exactly how that was going to happen. So I believe from previous discussion, this had been bottles and returnables that had a recycling value, and that those were the that's what we would be using. That revenue would go back into this citizen assistance fund. So the finance director was just hopeful that the board would make that more clear so that she knows exactly what the direction is to take funds from and add to the citizen fund.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments?
I think it's a good idea.
All right. Would someone like to make a motion?
I move to authorize the town manager to replenish the Citizen Assistance Fund with all revenue received from the redemption of cans and bottles collected at the transfer station.
Second.
Thank you. Any questions or comments before we go? Cheryl, go ahead.
Just a quick question. Is this tracked separately in the records?
Tracked.
Track the redemption funds, are they?
As sort of line item or
Well,
something.
Yeah.
I guess, Brennan, there must be receipts that are coming in from this, and so Barry can isolate these and make sure that she's moving the
Yeah.
money
Yeah.
on some frequency, which will defer to her on what frequency that is.
Yeah, that's a correct assumption. So she is able to track what monies are coming in specifically from cans and bottles. So that will be the money that's targeted for this replenishment.
All right, thank you. Roger, you had a question?
So what might the internal controls be from collected revenue and cans, just so we can have a live example, since we spent a lot of time discussing that earlier.
Brennan, can you speak to what controls there are? I assume that does somebody pick these up and then we get a payment for what is turned
I
in?
I might defer to Barry if she's aware of how this is actually collected. I assume yes, we have kind of a area where bottles and cans are placed at the transfer station, and at various periods we would take those into a redemption center, have them redeemed for cash, and then have the cash returned to, at this point it's been going to the general fund. So I don't know that there are internal controls to say how many bottles went in and how much money went to the general fund, to be honest. Barry might know more about that than I.
Barry, do you have anything to offer? Barry? Yeah,
Sure.
Barry,
Can she hear us? Oh,
Can you give us some
Um,
clarification?
Yes. How we know about what was redeemed is the finance office actually receives a check. As far as any control as to what happens at the transfer station, I can't speak to that. I don't know.
You receive a check from the redemption center directly?
Yes,
Oh, cool.
yes. Yep. And we've already called them and checked with them and some of the other, because we get rebates, other recycling rebates. So as those have come in, we've checked to make sure that we understand exactly what they're for. Which vendor does which thing, so that we can definitely isolate cans and bottles.
Cool. Thanks. That's neat.
Okay, thank you. Mary?
I'm wondering, just as a practice in church, that's an internal control thing, where you have cash, like your collection plate, or even when we used to run the rummage sale, tremendous amount of cash. We'd always have at least 2 people counted, in denominations, and then both sign off on it so that there's a witness. So it could be as simple as 2 people signing off on how many big bags there are.
But we have no way of knowing how much is in each bag. We all walk up there and dump our cans and bottles in, and I think it gets picked up. I don't think any of our staff takes it. I think it gets picked up.
I don't think you know the exact amount in each bag, but you'd know if a bag went missing. You know what I mean? I mean, you'd know the bulk. You kind of have a general idea, and you'd also have 2 people witness it.
Yeah.
And when you have 2 people, and I think that also was one of the principles stated in the overall audit, is just having, and just as a general principle, having 2 people look at a piece of financial information and make sure it's correct is always a good thing, whether it's a few dollars for a bake sale or if it's a giant budget. So,
Okay. All right. Well, we can assume that the finance office and the town manager will be looking at ways to make sure that we have a good system for this.
I think it'll be fine, actually.
Okay. All right. If there are no further comments or questions, Mary, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Marcia? Yes. Roger?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. All right, thank you. Okay, the next item. The late homestead filing penalty. In the packet, you will find a copy of 32 VSA 5410, and item G speaks to the penalty that can be imposed for non-compliance of filing the homestead declaration in a timely manner or not at all. So on this, the state says that we can include a penalty of up to 3% of the education tax. However, if the property incorrectly declared as a homestead is located in a municipality has a lower homestead tax rate than the non-homestead, or if an undeclared homestead is located in a municipality that has a lower non-homestead tax rate than the homestead rate, then the governing body of the municipality may include a penalty of up to 8% of the education tax liability on the property. Historically, we have always had a lower non-homestead rate, and so the town has imposed the maximum 8%. And I look back, the last time that this was considered by the board was July 8th of 2020. And a motion was made by Mary, seconded by Claudette, to reaffirm the current 8% penalty for non-compliance with the homestead declaration requirement, and that motion passed 3-2. So I put 2 motions on the motion sheet tonight. One is to reaffirm the 8%, and the other is an open-ended motion that we could establish a different percentage. So I will open this up for comments or questions. Mary?
In the past, I voted for the 8%, and that 8% is pretty stiff. And I'm thinking maybe it could be lower, but not too low, like perhaps 4, which I think is that our rate for in our general delinquent taxes is 4. So I would find that acceptable. I mean, I think it's a little bit of a deterrent, but I don't think it should be like a club. You know,
I agree.
like
I agree. Any other comments? Cheryl, you want to come up and?
Keep in mind.
Sure.
I think it's always good to review these and have the select board, consider a change. I do want to mention, and I grabbed some data, so I thought that might be helpful in looking at the last 3 years was all I could take time to grab. But in 2022, we had 40 late filed homestead declarations, and 3 of those requested a waiver. In 2023, we had 31 late filed homestead declarations and 6 people requested a waiver. And in 2024, the most recent year, we had 48 late filed homestead declarations and 6 people requested a waiver. I bring that to your attention because of a couple things that we've been doing in the town, and that is to waive, obviously whenever a revised tax bill goes out, and it has to once the homestead is changed and there's a revised tax bill sent out, which is work for the listers and the finance office, especially tracking and revising and answering a lot of phone calls and a lot of questions about what's taking place, because it's not real clear on the revised tax bill like we would hope it would be, but it generates a lot of communication with people that receive them, that they do receive the memo stating that they can request a waiver of it. And the listers have typically looked at these first for the most part. If it's a, what's the other word? If it's a hardship case, then they go a different route. But most of these are looked at by the listers. And in the cases where there's the first time that somebody didn't file on time, they don't do it a second time, and we've waived those penalties completely. We could go down to 4% ourselves and have them still pay a portion of it. Then they would have the ability to appeal to the Board of Listers, the Board of Civil Authority. But I just want you to know that the income related to the penalty for the town is helpful in offsetting the costs incurred in postage, labor, et cetera, phone calls, emails, a lot of things that go on behind the scenes for this process. This last year, it was up mainly because the listers did look for more properties that had not filed, and in the passing the information off to property valuation and review, they were at a point where they couldn't handle the 110 that we believed should have filed. We're never certain, but all we're supposed to do as listers is provide the data, and the state reviews it based on tax returns, et cetera, as to whether they are or are not a homestead person in Vermont. So there's a lot more that could have happened this year than did. So I will let you know that it seems to be an increasing issue, and therefore the more that are having to be revised and the work being done, the more work there is to do and getting that resolved. So I don't know if this was helpful, but it's a perspective. And I know last time when we talked about this, the fact that people can ask for a waiver is an important piece to it, and that there is the hardship cases, which also get addressed by the town manager now and the Board of Abatement at the moment. So I just think it's important. Again, the revenue isn't a bad thing for the town, and I just share that with you for your decision.
So the extra workload, which offices are handling that extra workload caused by having to revise the tax bills, et cetera?
Well, there's a regular download from the state that the listers do to bring the the information from the state into the grand list. When that happens, it generates a message in the grand list to say you have 10 revised tax bills to create. The listers don't do tax bills. We don't do that work. So that gets shifted over to the finance office, and they know the procedure there to create that set of revised tax bills. They have to get those. There's a date that they mail them that the listers have to know about, because we track the 14 days for the revisions or for the waiver requests, and we have to know that they requested the waiver in a timely, manner. So there's monitoring of that, and that goes on, starting in, well, they're supposed to file by April 15th. So anytime after that, there are still stragglers that come through that are on time that we don't have to do anything with, but the majority of the ones after the end of April into October 15th are all ones that will require the monitoring, the downloading, the monitoring, the finance department issuing them, the 14-day window being observed, and the communications by those that are getting these revised tax bills, whether they don't understand it, et cetera. So it's a team effort, but it's a lot of work. And, it isn't, and the waivers, that's just part of what we have to do. It's part of what we commit to do.
So when you do waivers, is that in a regular lister meeting?
So again, it follows the path of other appeals where the listers do hear from the property taxpayer and they give a reason. And we then take that to a deliberative session after our lister meeting, because we need to address these. These are, again, that's another part of it, the time to hold a meeting, address it. People can attend, or they can provide a written request. They don't have to attend. And so then that's done. And then we have to issue the letter, the decision letter after the meeting, and that goes out, and it has to then get back to the finance office, because we have to undo the penalty piece, and then they have to issue another revised tax bill. So the waiver requires an additional,
So it's the listers, it's the finance office, and on occasion, it could even be the town manager's office. If it's a case of hardship, it would be referred
to the Board of Abatement, which then has to get a group of people together to address those at the Board of Abatement. So just some thoughts.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Mary?
A question for Cheryl. Two questions. Your two lists, was it this past year and the year before? Like the dates of you had a couple of years where you could say. So what I'm wondering is, are some of these properties due to people moving in from out of state and they have no idea about Vermont taxes, so they're unaware? In other words, is this a part of the COVID chaos where people move in and they just sort of don't know the system? And I'm not saying that any action should be taken, but I'm just curious about, and also it seemed fairly consistent. You had a certain number that would just, a certain percentage, you could almost count on it, right? Which is just odd.
So I would answer that some of this is due to new people in Vermont and using out-of-state tax preparers and not understanding that there is this form that is not something you can extend with your tax return. And therefore, they extend everything and then they file the HS 122 at that time, which is bingo, you lose.
I think that may have come up.
It does. It does.
It's come up before in hardship cases too, where someone didn't know. I wonder if we just stuck on our town website, welcome newcomers and tell your accountant about the Vermont.
Well, Mary, to your point, it was on the tax reminder that just got sent out to everybody. It said, file your homestead decks because the new year is here.
Right.
You can't do it yet online, but you will be able to more towards the second half of February. There'll be a time when the tax department opens up that you can go right online and file it. You don't need your tax preparer to do it, but people think that that's what they're paying for, so they should let their tax preparer.
Just a little nudge to newcomers. It's like, be sure to tell your accountant.
We put it out from the lister's office all throughout. Once we know that the website is open and you can file, The listers send out reminders. We have it on the tax bills. I mean, there's so many ways that we do that.
Or you're reminding.
But not everybody's on the listserv. Not everybody's focused on what they feel they're paying their tax preparer to do, and things fall through the crack. But you can see many pay it as well. I mean, there's many a person that
It's
pays.
shocking to hear that, but yes.
But if they're a first-time filer because they've just moved to Vermont and they asked for a waiver because they didn't
Right.
understand, then
The listers tend to waive the first time situation. We understand that, and we send a letter saying, we understand, and we hope you'll file now going forward from this one-time waiver.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions or comments, Marcia?
So it seems like whether it's 8% or 4%, we're still gonna have work. And the percentage is probably just people who look up how to do things like waivers or people who just pay fines. But I think being punitive in a year where, you know, I'm seeing words on listservs and things about, oh, your tax return money is going to be late and all of this stuff. I think there's enough mass confusion, and I think taxes are high enough, and I'd like not to punish people with an extra 4%. So I would be very ready to go with 4% to match the regular property delinquent tax.
Okay, any other comments or questions?
I would just say these are very unrelated pieces to what we have the ability to do. One is a voter approved penalty rate that goes on to the warrant, and then this is legislative. Anyway, I just thought it would be helpful for you to know, and so you can anticipate a reduction in revenue with the change. That's the piece, obviously.
Thanks, Cheryl.
Yep. All right, any other questions or comments? Seeing none, would someone like to make a motion?
I have one comment, sorry.
Oh, I didn't see your hand, sorry. Go ahead.
I also just think I understand that they're for different purposes and that they are governed by different laws, but it would make a lot of sense to have everything either be 4 or 8. We discussed the penalty for taxes, at great length, and made that 4% with a little bit of data explanation behind that one. So I think there's just some merits to uniformity. And so since 1 has been vetted as 4, I think this should also be 4. Because I just think that made sense.
Right. Well, this state allows us to go up to 8% because our non-homestead rate has historically been lower. So we do have the option of going 0 to 8. All right. Would someone like to make a motion?
I move to establish 4% as the penalty for non-compliance with the Homestead Declaration, beginning with the April 15th, 2025 filing deadline.
All right. Is there a second?
Second,
Thank you.
Should we, given that, does this change our budget? I mean, Barry's probably online being like, oh, the calculations are probably going to be tweaked a little bit.
Well, yeah, it does. It changes our revenue.
By how, like, is it a hard, like, I mean, Brennan's making,
It's gonna be a pretty immaterial
okay.
hit to the budget.
So I'm just thinking about everything that has been drafted and voted on, and now we're changing a revenue component to it, but it's fine. Separate process.
Well, looking at the fiscal year 24 audit, penalties and interest on delinquent taxes is $58,379. I assume that that's part of that number. No, I don't see a separate line item for HS 122 non-compliance.
Barry might know where that sheet gets, where it gets.
Barry, can you tell us what revenue line the HS 122 penalty would go into?
I'd have to look at it. I can research it and let Brennan know tomorrow.
And I'm asking to ensure that we're not doing something that undermines your work without considering your work. So if it's okay to you, if it isn't nominal, then I feel even better about this decision. Is my point.
Yeah, I don't see a specific line item in revenue for that. So I don't know if we could isolate that number or not.
I can give you an amount if you don't mind.
Sure.
For 2024, it was about $40,000 that we assessed, and we waived 8,800. So you can
About 32.
reduce it by half. Is that
So instead of 32, we would bring in 16.
And that's based on that data.
Okay.
Not on what happens the next year, right?
But it does impact our revenue stream.
Barry, and I'd like to know if Barry and the town manager are concerned about it.
Yeah, that was the spirit of my poorly phrased questioning.
Okay. So the question, Brennan, is, are you or the finance office concerned about this loss of revenue?
I don't think we're terribly concerned about that. No.
Okay. All right. Any other comments or questions?
We're half voted.
I'm sorry?
We're half voted. 2 voted already and we're waiting for.
No, I haven't called for the vote yet.
I know. I'm
I've
waiting.
been known to change their mind.
Okay.
So
I'm trying to take the notes here, folks.
The official. So seeing no other comments, Mary, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Marcia?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
And I'm a no. Okay. The next item on the agenda is informational hearing draft presentation. Brennan has included several slides for us. And I would like to just quickly go through these and see if the board would like to suggest any edits. Brennan, can you share your screen so that we can?
I have a very difficult time trying to run the meeting and let people in and out and share a screen. So I could make you a co-host, Pam, or maybe Marcia a co-host if that would work.
I can co-host.
Slides that are in the packet are the draft as of, I think, Thursday or Friday. I've made a couple spelling changes to those, so we
Okay.
can, I guess, walk through them as we go. Nothing substantial.
Would you make me a co-host?
Yeah, I just click the button there.
Okay. All right.
I guess, Pam, if I may, I'll just say we really just reused the template that we had for last year, and Barry and I worked on this for a couple days of in and out here, and then obviously created a couple new slides further along in the deck. But I think what we were talking about last year was just providing folks that come to the meeting with an update on our staffing. So the first couple pages are really just updated with new folks that have come in from last year, and those are in parentheses, and highlighting if we have an open position currently, that's highlighted with the yellow.
Okay.
Are we making comments as we go through?
Yeah, does anybody have any comments on these first 3 slides?
On the Norwich Annual Informational Meeting, I'm wondering whether to capitalize annual informational meeting.
Yeah, I would agree that we should make those caps. Minor change.
The second one, is there by the time people see this, would there be an opening in the finance office?
Yeah, that was one of the changes.
Is that one of the edits? Okay.
We might have a filling
Well,
in another one by the end of the month. So
Okay, well, that would be lovely.
Okay, so we will just assume that that will get updated based on the
On what's
situation on the
happening.
ground at the
correct.
time. Okay,
Yep. As of the day of the meeting, we might have some changes to this.
okay, all right, that's good. Anything else on slide 3?
Let's see, it's numbered, okay. 2, 3.
That's the current staff for town departments, fire, police, and public works.
Okay, with that,
Okay, the next one. Current elected staff and Tracy Hall. I am wondering, why Amanda Billio is listed as Lister's staff. She is a contractor. She's not staff. Staff would be on payroll.
you have a public comment.
Yeah, I guess I use staff as in staffing the office. So
Yeah, I would say she's a contractor, Cheryl.
So, thank you, Pam. I was going to bring that up myself. The way it should read is listers are correct with an open position. Then it should read contract assessor, Amanda Bolio, and nothing under lister staff. There's no such structure in the office of that.
And I saw that
And we
in-
don't even have to list Amanda as anything, and we don't have, what we've had is a contracted assessor, which is not, you could,
So,
depend on your view, you could call it staff, but then if you have contracted plow company, are they on staff? I mean, I don't know what to
well,
say.
Cheryl, I wasn't aware that Amanda was a assessor. I thought she was a staff. She was a lister in another town that was hired under contract to assist the lister's office. That's why I use staff. I don't think she carries the designation of assessor, but I could be wrong.
It's not on the contract that we signed or approved.
right, but she has since received her assessor 1.
Again, I wouldn't have a problem if it was just removed, if that's the easiest discussion we can have, but that is, the way it is not accurate, is what I was going to state, and
Well, we've got a contract for somebody who's I can't remember what it says, but it doesn't say assessor. And if she got licensed as an attorney or a doctor, it wouldn't matter. We have a contract for what she was hired to do. So I think because she's in a small office and we're paying her and people could walk in and she might be there, might be nice. It's different than the snowplow driver, I think.
All right, and in future, please wait to be recognized. Thank you. Mary, go ahead.
I'm wondering, we've got this comparison with the contracted snow plowing. Maybe we should add that. Well, because, I mean, it is an issue in our town that we would really like to have mostly our own crew do the snow plowing. And there's some routes where that's not possible, but it's part of the scenario for public works. So, but maybe they can't.
So
I don't know.
So you're proposing that we could go back to slide 3 and add contract with Chase Services for snow plowing?
Yeah, and then on the listers one, just put contracted.
I can go get the
Assessor.
contract. I'm gonna go get the contract.
So can I ask a question?
Certainly, Roger, go ahead.
So I recognize that we did this last year. We recognize this. We did this last year in part because there was lots of follow-up and interest in town staffing, and also because of the structure of the lister's office was effectively being voted on, right? So it would make sense to tell people what it currently was. So while I'm happy to tell the people that while they might be more quiet in public internet forums, there isn't much of a material change from 3 years ago. I nonetheless think that this is not actually needed. Like, why do we actually have this at all?
So you're saying that we would not do any staffing slides? Is that what you're proposing?
I don't think so. I mean, I guess it's nice from a meet your neighbor kind of approach, but this also is just like a list of names on a white screen, which I don't really think does much. The point that it actually makes is that we are deficient at retaining staff, and I don't know if we really want to do that at town meeting. I think we should just.
It's actually the opposite, if I may.
It's the opposite.
How
Yes, go ahead,
so?
Brett.
We have vacancies across departments. I think this isn't even updated. We have more vacancies than what is listed here. So
Brennan,
I
go
think we
ahead.
should just not. I think we should just not advertise that. We should just delete these slides.
Okay, let's let Brennan explain his thinking.
Well, my thinking is I feel like we have actually made some progress. We've gotten department heads filled. We've gotten police office positions filled. We have, as every other town, retention, and we have recruitment, and we focus on that. So again, the purpose of these first 3 slides would be if someone came to the informational meeting and wanted to learn a little bit more about who is actually currently working in the staff, because most people in the community are not daily going into Tracy Hall or other departments and talking with people. This would be a chance to know who's working for them. And that was the purpose. I have no problem taking them all out. We could do that if the board would wish to do that.
Marcia, go ahead.
Well, I actually think, people are sitting there hopefully with their town report and they're looking at line items potentially. And so this kind of tells you, oh yeah, I'm paying for that amount of people in this office. So I think it's important to have it.
Okay, Mary?
I think it's important to have it too. It's like, to me, it's the face of the town. And it's recognizing the people who help it to function. So no, I mean, you to put their pictures in, but we're not going to have production values like that, I don't think.
I don't.
Yeah, I think all it is a list of names with like literally highlighted that you can literally highlight the number of vacancies. And so I think someone looking at this document will ultimately walk away with the list with the idea that there are continued vacancies. And so you can address that as I suppose it's how you address it. And so perhaps Brennan will address it as the good valued efforts of, government work. But I think as a reader, I'm reading a list of names and a lot of vacancies.
Okay, well, maybe one thing we could do is take off the yellow highlights, and maybe Brennan, since he's doing the presentation, could say, well, we have an opening, for a highway worker. If you know anyone who is looking for employment, we're hiring. But I don't see any issue with keeping these. I have no problem with it. Cheryl, you wanted to address something about the lister?
So what I would suggest for the lister's office is to remove the two lines there and replace it with contracted lister, Amanda Bolio.
Contracted lister.
That's what her contract states it to be. And we have KRT currently as our contracted firm to do the reappraisal. So any assessment work, as I've said in the past, gets run by them, but they're not staff, if you will. They're, again, a contracted arrangement, but happy to
Maybe
list them if you wish to.
KRT Reappraisal Services doing the FY25
Reappraisal. That could work.
Question. Yes, go ahead.
So many times I've said, aren't we going to re-advertise for the assessor? Because KRT is hired for one little thing. And so we've heard that you were going to advertise, but you haven't advertised. So I think it is an open position. And the board in the past has, it's in the minutes, they've talked about what's the structure for the lister's office. And you've said listers and assessor. And so I think, unless everybody decides there isn't going to be an assessor in the lister's office, then I think that's an open position.
So we leave it in, sure.
I believe, Madam Chair, I believe we've removed it from the lister's budget area that we just put through in the budget, if I'm not mistaken. I had a chance to chat with Barry about the lister's budget and what we were proposing. What I would say again, Marcia, to your question is, we are working with KRT on a big project, which is a townwide reappraisal, and every property is being assessed as of April 1st. It will not be ready April 1st. It will be as of April 1st. We are utilizing their, quote, professional skills to help with assessments throughout this process. Once we're all done with the work ahead of us, which are grievances, Board of Civil Authority Appeals, they are with us throughout all of that. Phew. Then we'll put an RFP out for an assessor, but it's a position to support the office, and call it staff, whatever, but it is currently, as it exists, we have a contracted lister and we have KRT reappraisal.
Yeah.
Sure. So when we agreed to hire the Amanda, it was because we'd lost the assessor. You guys didn't have the skill set to do the stuff that he did and she did. And so she was going to be doing entries that you couldn't do. That's what we understood. So I don't have a problem with adding KRT because people in town are seeing KRT. But I think the other three things should stay as well.
So the request for services that we put out was for someone who was more skilled at doing what the contract assessor did, which was property transfer returns, which is reading the deeds and getting all into that stuff, and current use work. Now, as time goes on, we all gain more experience at doing that, and we train each other, and she's been helpful in training for those areas. That's what the contract assessor did, the last one. We rarely got assessment work out of him that he did himself. He oftentimes proposed to the listers, and we talked things over and came up with assessments. So I do think it's a misleading title, but because they're helping with assessments, we hope that's why it's been deemed an assessor. But we're contracting for that. We're not staffing with town employment. We're contracting it, which is a different, you have to give your liability insurance. You have to say you're not an employee, all that. So my point is, if you're looking at current staffing in the lister's office, the assessor position isn't open until after the reappraisal is over, and that we have a contracted lister is the accurate.
What is the end date of her current contract?
It would be the end of June of this year.
June 30th.
Yep.
Okay. All right, thank you. Any other questions or comments?
And I appreciate having it accurate.
Brennan does.
Oh, Brennan?
Well,
didn't-
I just, again, I have no problem amending these slides to the liking of the board, as this is their presentation to the public. So if I am hearing this correctly, I'm being directed to add contracted assessor KRT and contracted lister Amanda Bellio. And that would make everyone happy with this slide.
I think it's contracted reappraisal firm, KRT, reappraisal services.
Right.
I think that would do it.
I have a question.
Roger?
Is the administrative assistant position in the lister's office vacant?
There is no such position at this time.
Oh my gosh. So similar to sort of Marcia's line of questioning, we talked about how that was indeed actually, I don't even know what to say. It's just like, whatever, it's Wild West. People just do whatever they want. Okay, never mind.
We're allowing the elected officials in the lister's office to run their department as they feel it is best.
Was
Right.
what was published in the town report? I haven't looked at my copy for this office.
We don't have the town
We don't have it
report
yet.
There is no town report at this point. It won't be done until February 21st.
Okay, lovely. So do we have it? Is this, I assume this was pulled from that, Brennan?
We have a budget and we have a lister office wages. And the listers are in charge of how their office is staffed, whether those wages are paid to the listers or to an assistant. If they hire one, they have the flexibility to run their office as they see fit. That's how the budget is structured.
So when did Cheryl resign from the position of administrative assistant or assistant?
I don't know that there was a formal resignation or that one was needed. She's being paid as a lister. And that began 1st of August? No,
I think it was the
September?
beginning of September, the vote that took place in August
right.
transitioned the office compensation structure to listers being paid by the hour.
Right.
That was voted.
So I don't think there was any need for a formal
It was
resignation
voted out.
and hiring as a lister. She was a lister, now she's paid as a lister.
Okay, that's fine, but I think it should just be noted that we find calling the contracted lister a staff member egregious and inaccurate, and yet we are talking around a lot of other realities on the ground, right? Like, so it can be a rhetorical point, but
She is under contract, Roger. She's not on payroll. She is a contractor and she gets a 1099 for her services. So contracted lister is
I
accurate.
understand that. I think someone out there understands my point, and that's fine.
Okay, any other comments on pages 1, 2, or 3? If not, we'll move on to page 4, fiscal year 2026 budget goals and challenges. Any comments there? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to page 5, the budget summary. Any comments or questions there? Seeing none, we'll move on to page 6. Right? Okay, yep, okay, we're good. Exploring the tax rate. Any comments or questions there? Mary?
I'm a little uneasy about both slides about the tax rate, especially the second one. Just because I believe we set that tax rate in July.
You mean this,
Right?
this is the one you're
Exploring the tax rate. Oh, well, I mean, okay,
This
maybe we're
one.
not to it yet. Oh, we went past the budget summary, right?
Yeah.
And then there was 2 slides about the
Okay.
tax rate.
Right, well, it's pages, I'm losing track.
I don't have numbered pages here, so.
So exploring the tax rate. Let's work on that one.
Okay, exploring the tax rate. Any questions or comments there?
Yeah, well, I was gonna say, I mean, we usually just do this in July. And it's a matter of arithmetic that we've got our approved budget and we've got our hopefully new grand list, and we just do arithmetic to find out what that is. So I'm not sure why it's in here.
Did we do this last year, Brennan, or is this a new slide that was added?
Yeah, so this is 2 new slides that were added, and Barry and I, when we were, I guess, putting this draft deck together, thought that this would be useful because I think we know what our budget increase has been. Those are the prior 2 slides. But the question that most people are going to ask is, what does that do to my tax rate, my tax bill? And so again, with the missing information of our grand list for the next year, which we will not know until we actually set the rate, these slides were being created just to help people understand that this is not a 24.5% increase to their tax rate, as that has been kind of floated through the listserv and picked up by others. If you go to the second slide, Marcia, so this kind of explains that the fiscal year 25, with the surplus of $700,000 that got infused into that, didn't actually, without that, our tax rate would have been 0.767 last year. And what we're looking at is a little under a 4% increase in the tax rate. Again, with the giant caveat that this is based on last year's numbers, last year's grand list as the denominator. And so we expect it will change. If folks feel like this is confusing or this is information that is not necessary, we can easily take these two slides out. But the thought behind it was to try to give people a little more comfort in what they're actually could see as far as a realistic increase in the rate for fiscal year 26.
Yeah. I'm on the fence about whether to take it out, but I think it should be for people who haven't really thought about when is the tax rate set and what are the two major factors that go into it. I'm thinking that if we're exploring the tax rate and they don't know that it's basically arithmetic, you have to have the grand list, you have to have your approved budget, and that it happens in July. I just think that those are pieces that if we're going to explore this, those are pretty important pieces. Like the answers to this will not be apparent until July.
Right. So if you go to the second slide, so the first little asterisk there is, I guess, speaking to the fact that that was the rate that was set on July 25th of last year when we set the rate. So
okay, but my point is that we're still in the process. We've developed the budget, then we'll present it to the voters.
Mm-hmm.
But this tax rate is not even going to be an actual thing until July. So I would, instead of having an asterisk and having it be sort of hidden, it's like, oh yeah, that happens in July. I'd kind of put it out front. It's like, yeah, when we set the tax rate, that's in July. And the process is to, divide 1% of the town valuation by your budget. I mean, that's so basic, but if you have never thought about it before, it's something you'd want to say, the timing of it and what's the basic idea. So I would just present it differently. And others may not feel that way. So I'm willing to hear others.
Marcia?
I think that's a good idea. Maybe it goes like on this slide, just as a simple, very large, equation, like grand list.
So divide by budget equals tax rate.
In July, grand list divided by budget equals tax rate.
And that's actually July 1st, isn't it that specific?
No.
We have a deadline of July 25th
Okay.
to lodge the grand list. And that at that point, and we could even request an extension if it's needed, but hopefully by July 25th, we'll meet the statutory deadline to file the lodge the grand list. And then after that, the tax rate can be set. I would just like to point out here that the actual tax rate in fiscal year 25 was 0.678. What's proposed for fiscal year 26 is 0.797 based on using the same grand list. That is a 17.5% increase. That is not 3.9 because you cannot count the $700,000 infusion and compare against that because we don't have an infusion to add this year. So we're going from 25 to 26 and we're going up 17.5%. So I would not support putting in 3.91.
If
Brian?
I may. So
Yes.
if you look at column 3, that's explaining to the voters that this would have been a small increase had we not infused the surplus. That is the purpose of that slide. I'm kind of inclined at this point to take these two slides out. After hearing the confusion it's created with the board that is pretty sophisticated related to this, it might create a mayhem of confusion for folks that are coming in once a year and wanted to know what their tax rate is.
So
Yeah, and we have too many moving parts this year to make any kind of projections that could be relied upon. And, you know, if somebody sees their assessment doubling, which many of them may, you know, they're going to be more concerned about that number than what the tax rate is. So, it's
I just remember.
Might be wise to.
Yeah, go ahead, Brandon.
I just remember last year very specifically, this was what people wanted to know. And we were questioned about it. What is the rate? How did this change? So
Yeah,
that,
there's-
again, that was the thought of a hypothetical. This is what this would look like. Again, caveat, we don't know what the new grand list is going to be yet. But if it didn't change, it's a fairly, again, a 4% increase, taking out the surplus that was infused. Again, at this point, I'm inclined just to take these two out completely, and the board can explain that we just don't know at this point, and we're not willing to put any sort of a hypothetical out into the public.
Yeah, I fear that if you say 3.9% on a slide, people are going to hold you to it. And if it's different from that, all hell's going to break loose, and we don't need that. Marcia, you had a comment?
No, I'll defer Roger.
Okay,
has his hand
Roger,
up.
go ahead.
I mean, I think it's appropriate to like offer an explanation, and as long as you make sure that the slide is labeled accordingly. I mean, if we sit through the school board presentations and they are made up of lots of lovely theoreticals that everyone seems to be enamored to hear about, right? So, and I think it proves, it inspires a sense of confidence that public officials are able to explain sort of all of the variations. So I don't have a problem with this. I would just, I think this is good. I would just, and I thank Brennan for having to do the work of explaining it and then fielding questions. But like, this is absolutely appropriate. Just make sure that the slide makes it clear that this is, has some hypotheticals, but all of the town meeting day presentations are a series of hypotheticals, especially the school one. It just has lots of fun animated graphics. It's like the greatest smoke and mirror show in the land, right? So yeah, this is good.
Thank you. Marcia?
So I agree with Roger. I think that we need to have something because, as Brennan said, this is what people wanted last year. And I specifically remember one person, going on about couldn't believe we didn't have something like this. So maybe what we need is just to add Mary's simple equation and make fiscal year 26 sort of a different color. So it says, for example, in fiscal year 26.
My problem with that is that if you say, well, if the grand list didn't change, it is going to change and we don't know by how much. So putting that number in there makes me a little uncomfortable. Cheryl?
Cheryl Lindbergh. I had a couple comments on the slides. I'm calculating it the same way that Pam is, because comparing what it would have been to what it was this past year. So you actually raised taxes based on 5,273,414. That's what you actually raised taxes on. This time around, it's going to be 6,200,264. Those are the numbers if the budget is approved. This middle column is not comparative to what will happen. And it is a 17.5% increase. If that's what that's what happens. So the middle column of the surplus is comparing a false situation to what we might see next year, because we didn't do FY25 plus surplus column.
Right. So if we had not put in the surplus, then it would have been 0.767 with an increase of 3.91. But we did put in the surplus, so the increase is 17.5% year over year.
Right. That's a true fact, and that's a true calculation. The other two comments I would make, When looking at these, I agree with Mary's thoughts. I think it's a little early to be trying. I know people want to know that. Unfortunately, this year is very different with the reappraisal in place. Some things are going to even out for some of the low-end properties because the other ones that have been underpaying their share of taxes are going to see the difference. So that, do as you wish on doing this, but there's so much unknown. And I will add a couple of questions on exploring the tax rate slide. Exemptions are currently not known. I don't know what that means. And I was going to ask Brennan if he could explain that statement on that slide.
Yeah, I think we have various exemptions that come into play that are not known at this time.
So like a military exemption, that sort of thing?
That would be an example.
We also have exemptions for the Grange and
I just for a second would say in the past, when there hasn't been a reappraisal year, it's fair to say to the listers, hey, you've been working on the grand list and you're up till January or February, whatever. Have you got any projection on an estimated grand list? And we could try to do that, but exemptions are not going to change. The veterans exemptions are set. Those are individual exemptions. They're not going to impact the town overall. They're going to just help those people that get them to reduce their assessment and therefore their tax bill. But we do have to raise other money to make up for that. That said, most of these are, I was trying to go over in my head, what are we talking about? So veterans is one. The ones that we voted,
Churches,
but those are already,
house, they're all in there, right?
those are all already in the FY25 columns.
A lot of veterans moving in or
Yeah.
something.
What might happen are some current use changes, and that will impact, again, individuals and the overall, but I didn't see the relevance to that comment with.
So if you read the sentence above the bullets, we're just trying to disclaim that there's a lot of things that are unknown here, and those are three of them.
And on the second slide where there's the tax rate comparison table, it's more proper to say that the grand list value for FY25 is currently unknown. Am I right there? Wait a second,
FY26, we don't know.
It'll be as of April. It's not expected to be confirmed April 1st of 2025. The grand list is set on April 1st of 2025 and April 1st of every year, but the values are not determined and final until the abstract, which is June 4th. So there's a lot of work that goes on between April 1st and June 4th that changes assessments. So I just wondered if there would be a better word. It is expected to be available.
Cheryl,
It's not, the grand list isn't lodged till July.
July 25th is our statutory deadline, and with the BCA hearings, I mean, the grievances of the BCA hearings, there are additional changes to the grand list leading up to, well, no, it's the grievances that change.
Grievances get handled before the filing of the grand list. So the grievances will adjust, the decisions of the Board of Listers will adjust the grand list for any grievances that we agree with. And anything that's not changed and gets appealed to the BCA will happen in August, September. So I'm only trying to say that the word confirmed is an unusual term to use with regard to a grand list.
Will be confirmed no later than July 25th.
Well, I've never heard the word confirmed. I would say that It's, you're either filing the abstract or lodging the grand list, and that lodging of the grand list isn't until we've tried to do it by the end of June so that the July tax rate or the July could be when the tax rate gets set by the select board to accommodate the first due date. So I don't know what's going to happen this year with the number of grievances that may occur, and it may push us closer to that later date, which is still allowed by law,
Well, last year,
July 20 something or other.
last year, the tax rate was set on July 27.
Yeah.
And it was still out in time for the August 30-day due date. So I would say the grand list value for FY 26 is currently unknown and is expected to be lodged no later than July 25th.
Of 2025 to set the tax rate. That's where it goes. And the April 1st is just a frozen date. That's what the date it freezes the ownership of all the property in town. There is nothing beyond that for April 1st because the assessments are still getting changed with building permits and other things that occur between then and the filing of the abstract, which will be June 4th, according to the contract. So I'd just like to see that.
How about we change that word to expected to be set April 1st, 2025? All we're telling people here is really that we don't know it now.
The values are not set on that date, Brennan. The ownerships are set on that date. The values are not set until the abstract, and that is even open for grievances, and then the lodging is in late June or July. So I'm just.
Well, how about this, Cheryl? Tell me, I will write lodge no later than, what is the date that I should enter on the slide, assuming we're even going to keep this slide?
Statutory deadline is July 25th.
Yes.
Okay. So 7/25/26.
On or before, you could say, on or before July 25th of 2025.
I'm going to say no later than.
Okay, that's fine.
And yeah, that's when the select board can then sit down and set the tax rate. When
If
the,
we vote for it.
Yeah.
okay. All right, so let's go back to the first one, the exploring the tax rate. Did we want to change any of that, eliminate that page? What are we doing there?
So I will just point out to the idea of trying to put a calculation here. So 1 and 2, I think are explaining the calculation. Like, to me, I don't know if it's useful to try to put something down there with a numerator and a denominator. Like, if you read through that, again, for lay people, I think it makes sense. We're explaining the calculation that goes into finding the grand list resulting in the tax rate. So those 3 steps were, again, I think as clear as we could be about how that process occurs.
Okay, Mary?
I have a suggestion. I think it is clear how it's calculated from the first part, the way you've written it. But what is not clear, and you've stated this later, an unknown grand list value due to the reappraisal, but we are going to have a value by July 25th.
Mm-hmm.
So perhaps that line.
Well, but this whole slide, this whole slide is like a hypothetical disclaimer, right? Like, I mean, that's what we're doing here is we're explaining. So I think I understand that the grand list is going to be lodged no later than 7/25/26. But for this slide, I don't know that that's relevant.
7/25/25. It's going to be lodged this year.
25, sorry, yes.
Make sure we get the right year in there.
Yes, 25, correct. So again, the whole purpose of these 2 slides, which again, regretting that we even attempted, was to try to explain how tax rates work and to try to educate the public that's coming to this meeting as to what this actually looks like as far as an increase from the last year. And again, I'm at this point completely happy to remove 2 of these slides from our deck and move along.
Well, I don't have a problem with this slide, but I'm just wondering if somebody says, well, what exemptions are we talking about? What's going to be exempted? Like, are you going to be prepared with an answer?
I mean, we could add more bullet points. Exemptions are this, this, and this, but does that matter? I mean, again, this to me is like getting into the.
Okay, so you're just trying to give a big picture
Yeah,
explanation.
we don't
Okay.
know all of these exemptions. We're disclaiming that. That's
Okay.
the whole purpose
So
of
there
that.
will be some exemptions such as for veterans and other tax exempt.
Right. We don't know at the time of the meeting whether the other monetary articles are all going to pass, right? So that could change this. And we don't
Right.
have a grand list, which is the huge missing piece of any setting of a grand list or a tax rate. So I guess if we could, just to move this along, do we want to keep these 2 slides? Maybe would be a good place to start. If the majority wants to keep them, then we should continue to like nitpick on the wording of this. But if we don't, let's just get rid of them and move on to the next piece of the presentation.
Okay, Marcia, how do you view the first one, exploring the tax rate? Would you keep it?
Yeah, what I was gonna say was, we need to be prepared to be able to say something substantive. Because questions will be pointed as they should be. And as Roger pointed out, they get, chapter and verse from the school district. And I think it's only right that we be prepared with something. And I don't think it's right that members of the board get up and try and off the cuff, explain this, because it's actually not going to go well. But I think that if you have something in writing, then you can stick to that, and it's simpler because people can see it and they can hear it. And if there is a question like about exemptions, Brennan can answer it. So yes, I would keep that.
All right, Mary, would you keep the first slide?
No, I think it's confusing.
Okay, Roger, would you keep the first slide? Exploring the tax rate.
Yes, you have to explain how you don't know. And that's showing you how you know something. Like
Right.
that's important.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's how it goes.
Okay. I'm inclined to keep it. I think we need to try to explain to people that there are too many variables that we don't know at this time, so we can't really give you a tax rate. So we'll keep that slide because 3 have said yes. The second tax slide, the tax rate comparison table. Marcia, would you keep that one?
Yes. I mean, I might do something to sort of highlight fiscal year 26 is not a done deal. It should be obvious, but I think with that,
Maybe put the word estimated.
yeah, like for example, fiscal year 26.
Okay. Mary, how about you?
No, it's just still find it confusing.
Okay, Roger?
Yes, and I would move the notes. I would not make them notes. I would incorporate the notes more explicitly in the table. But yes, it's again showing you how it is that you don't know and providing an example of how tax rates are set, which is an educating moment for the
Okay. All right, and for my vote, if we do not remove column 2, the FY25 plus surplus from this and change the increase to 17.5% year over year, I am a no. So we have 2 yes and 2 no. Unfortunately, our 5th
Well, let's try
member
and
is
find
not here.
compromise.
I thought we were just up and down, not trying to edit.
Well, we got a 2 and 2.
Well, we have a 2-2, so
I know.
Marcia's suggestion is we compromise. Do you have something that you'd like to offer, Marcia?
Nope.
Okay, Mary? What would make you comfortable?
I can't be comfortable with this. Any of
Okay,
it.
all right. Roger, would you offer anything as a compromise?
I don't really understand why you insist on these changes. Perhaps you've explained it and it went over my head, but
Because that fiscal year 25 plus surplus did not happen to change the tax rate to a higher number. So we had a tax rate of 0.678. That was a real thing. If we use the same numbers with the proposed budget, it would be 0.797 or 17.5% increase year over year. So
is that true?
using the numbers to reduce the tax rate was a real thing. And proposing that it would have been higher if we hadn't done the surplus didn't happen.
I don't know if that's accurate.
It is accurate. The year over year numbers would be 0.678 going to 0.797 or 17.5% increase. That is a real thing.
Is that what this table is doing?
No, that's the
like-
problem here. It's the whole purpose of this table was to try to explain to folks that because of that infusion of $700,000, what we had last year was an artificially low tax rate, very purposely done. We were very clear, this is artificially lowered to the benefit of the people paying their taxes in Norwich. So again, if we're going to shock them with this is going to go up 17.5%, to me that is an unwise thing to put out there because that's not actually the increase that their taxes saw.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is a real thing. If we put that money in there to lower the tax rate. So this year we're not putting the money in to lower the tax rate. So it's jumping from 0.678 to 0.797, which is a 17.5% increase. That is real.
And column 2 is explaining to folks that may not understand this, that the $700,000 surplus was included there. And if it hadn't have been, what we're really looking at here year over year is a little less than 4% of an increase.
Right.
Again, that was a choice that the board made to make that infusion to lower the rates. So again, I would certainly not put 17.5% increase here and then tell people we don't really know what your tax rate increase is going to be. People are going to be terrified of that. It's just, I think, very unwise.
So I am a no on this. We're 2-2. If we cannot make a decision, then I think the decision is it doesn't happen.
Suggestion.
Yes, go ahead.
Why don't we throw this back to Brennan and Barry and maybe instead of trying to help people with percentages, just explain, this is what we did in 2025 and we lowered the tax rate by having this infusion and we're not having that this year. I don't know, but if you guys play with it and come back next time.
I'd rather just take it out. I mean, we spent a lot of time and effort on this, trying to explain it, trying to make it clear, and it's obviously not clear to people what we were doing. So why don't we just leave slide 1, exploring the tax rate, explain that we don't have a grand list and we won't until July, and again, that's the explanation. People are not going to get more detail than that.
We were going to put the July 25th on the slide that we're eliminating. So do you want to put July 25th on the exploring the tax rate slide for clarification that the unknown grand list value due to the reappraisal won't be known until no later than July 25th?
If that is the will of the board, we could certainly do that. Again, I don't think it's germane at this point, really, because it's still unknown.
Information.
Yeah.
Roger?
I really do not want another year of people in my community coming up to me with rampant misinformation and then having to explain to them that it's not 24% or 17% or explaining the full context. And while I can appreciate that they don't think it's a true 3.91%, I would like to be able to like have an actual appropriate explanation with the full complexity. Because, you know, what we're constantly fighting because we don't put out information like at a time that's appropriate is just we're just fighting people's own.
Well, if your
posts.
tax rate goes from 69 cents to 80 cents, it's going up 17.5%.
I understand,
Fact of life.
but then
It's-
the full context of that is like the decision making of the prior year, right? And that's
Yeah,
all
but-
this was showing. And so it's just
The decision-making of the prior year brought it down to just under 69 cents. And this year, we're not doing that. So it's
Right,
going
and
up
so
17.5%. Math is math. You can't change the formula. It's just, it is what it is. Facts are stubborn things.
I disagree. Facts, like numbers, require explanation, and so I think that this was like an attempt to do that. And if like we refuse to provide an explanation, we're just going to have another year of just where I just spend my sidebars showing the full complexity and writing my own comparison tables for my community instead of just having it in an appropriate forum. And
Right.
what a shame.
Right. Well, my worry is if you tell people your tax rate's going up 4% and it goes up more, then they're going to be angry. So maybe we just don't put percentages in front of people.
Well,
Sure.
that's
Joe, did you want to offer something?
I would just like to add that the tax rate isn't the most significant piece to all of this, because the tax rate could be 60 cents. If the grand list is going to go up with assessments and if we're 40% below fair market value right now, which is what our common level of appraisal says, and assessments go up 40% and we need to raise these taxes, the tax rate is whatever it is. I mean, you don't have the grand list, you can't come up with a rate. It could be lower than last year's, but people's tax bills are going to go up because their assessments are greater. So I do feel that that's an important thing to explain, but I think the numbers using this current grand list is misleading because it's not a good number.
Right.
I hear what you want to do.
Yeah, that's why I don't want to keep this slide. I think it's misleading.
We've
All right.
we've done calculations with the previous year's tax rates for years. And I'm saying, like, do I think that those examples should have been more than just exercises and should have teased out a greater complexity? Yeah, like maybe a more compelling, like thoughtful presenter could have done that. But like, you know, we're like raking this over when we've like I've made one of these before for years I've done it. So
Right, but the problem this year, Roger, is that the reappraisal is going to be exponentially higher because of COVID. And all of
okay, we haven't had a reappraisal since God knows when. It's always been awful.
2016.
I can't with this nonsense. It's fine. We'll move on. We'll delete it. But like, it's just like unbelievable. We have like memories of a sieve.
Well, I think that this year is unusual in that it's been 9 years since we had a reappraisal, and then we had COVID with all the price increases that people were willing to pay to be refugees to this area from the big cities. And so it's going to be a very different appraisal than we've ever had in the past. All right, moving on.
So if I may, just seeking guidance, we're 86ing slide 9, which is the table that was created. This table in front of us is not going to appear in the next draft of this.
Right, it did not get 3 votes, so it is going away.
Okay.
Marcia?
So how are we going to answer questions? Well, I'm going to have to answer them on the fly, I think. Or, you know, I think the most compelling thing to say is that we have unknowns. The unknown of the grand list is a huge reason that we can't give a straight answer. It's not available.
Like I
It's
said,
reality.
yes, it's been 9 years since we've had a reappraisal and we've had the COVID effect.
Unusual circumstances, and that is just a number. It's not, I mean,
And
I
projecting.
can tell the truth. It may not be very reassuring, but I think you kind of just have to lay it out. It's pretty simple. I'll do it, you know.
Okay, all right, so
Mary is hired to explain this to the,
Well, I'm not going to go into details. I'm just.
I remember
I
Mary-
painted in a broad brush and,
wait a minute, I remember Mary volunteering to be Vanna White.
yes, I have done it. I've done it at the last minute too, but, you know, I would not give it, could not give a nuance. I'm not going to give a lecture on how, you know, how we've made all decisions over several years about how we've spent our money. And I do think that that surplus also came through as a COVID artifact as well of paying our payroll for a year using the ARPA money. So
Right.
the disruptions of the COVID and our climate are kind of rippling through everything that we do.
Correct. Okay, can we move on
I hope we do.
to the 3 options presented for the use of the surplus? Does anyone have any comments or questions on that? It's just regurgitating the 3 articles. So I don't have any questions. Mary?
I don't have any questions. I think it's a very good slide. There probably will be questions about the bridge fund. And if I were the Vanna and I were being asked, I would say we didn't specifically say Moore Lane Bridge because we're not quite sure what we want to do. But if we, you know, if we do have to go in the direction for it, we've got $200,000. If we don't, there are plenty of other bridges in this town that will need attention. So we're not, I don't believe we're wasting that money.
Okay, then we've got Cheryl.
Do you mind?
No, go ahead.
I wonder if it wouldn't be helpful again to mention the reappraisal, the ongoing reappraisal of this town properties in any of this. I see, I don't know if it was, well, the select board approved the contract for the reappraisal, so I was wondering if that would, I'd like to have it, you know, be repetitive a bit. I'll be putting posts out, but the more we say, the more people are remembering that, oh yeah, it got delayed a year. Now we're going to have it this year for certain. I don't know if that's agreeable, but I would appreciate it. Even if I was just a resident to know that.
Okay, thank you. All right, we have 2 more slides. The completed initiatives and ongoing work of the select board, town manager and staff. Any comments or questions on this slide?
That's.
Looks good.
There's one mistake on it. Personnel policy was approved on October 23rd, not September.
That's where I meant to put this in my comment.
Oh, your comment was on.
For these, you know, initiatives and ongoing work. That was what I was
Okay,
thinking.
yeah, I think that's a good suggestion, adding the KRT reappraisal.
that we
Does everyone-
didn't, we failed to accomplish the reappraisal last year.
Well, it's ongoing work.
Well, give me some copy and I'll add a bullet point, but how would you like that explained? And Pam, I wasn't clear on what date you were referring to that was incorrect.
The town of Norwich personnel policy was adopted on October 23rd. You have September.
Okay, so change that to October.
Yep.
I might
then-
also, sorry,
Go ahead, Roger.
I might also characterize significant efforts made over the past year to recruit and retain. But that was alluding to a previous comment that I made. But I think people don't agree, so that's fine.
You didn't?
I'm okay with progress.
Yeah. Okay, so we would add something for the KRT reappraisal. To be completed in 2025.
Nearing completion or something.
I mean, I would suggest, Madam Chair, that you're something that just gets it out there, that's giving it ongoing reappraisal work will be done this year, and not necessarily focus on it having to be extended, but just that it will be done.
Right, the KRT reappraisal will be completed in 2025.
Something like that.
Will it?
Yes, it will.
Like unbelievable.
So again, I can happily add a bullet point related to the KRT reappraisal work, because that is obviously an important thing that's happening in the town, and people are probably aware of it, but it's fine to remind them. So I am still unclear of the language the board would like included, and if we could define that, I'll write it down right now and I'll put it in there tomorrow.
I'd be happier with just KRT ongoing appraisal, because the board doesn't know,
Control it.
or control it. So
just say KRT ongoing reappraisal services.
yeah, put it on the second page. There's room there to make that little smaller text.
Okay, and work.
KRT ongoing reappraisal services will be added to the last slide then.
Okay, and then Roger's comment about recruitment and retention of staff. That's,
I don't think people agree, so we can move on.
I agree. Yes, Marcia, myself, and you, Mary.
Say again.
Just adding that one of the ongoing efforts is retention and recruitment and retention of staff.
Well, I think Roger wanted to change the word progress to effort. Or something. Effort, significant effort, and I don't agree with that. I mean, I do agree there was a lot of effort, but I also think it's good progress. So.
Yeah, I think if
I
you
don't
go to
wanna change
slide 2 or 3, so we have, since the last board meeting the last informational meeting in March, we've added a planning director. And again, parentheses highlighted that. And we've added, go down to the next slide if you would, Marcia. So we've added a police officer.
Right here.
And we've added a building and grounds technician. So again, we have work to do. It's ongoing. We bring people in and we lose people to the market, and it's, I think, progress that we've filled a couple of those spots.
Okay. So I guess we would just leave it significant progress. Is that
That's what I
consensus?
That's what I would like, but
Okay,
to everybody to decide.
progress, efforts, it's tomato.
I'm happy with progress. I mean, I think we've made progress.
Okay. All right, I think we've done it. It's almost 9 o'clock. I'd like to move on. And Brennan, do you feel like you have what you need?
I believe I do. So just for the next step here, we'll make some edits. We'll remove the slide we talked about removing. And do people want to see this in the next packet as like a draft?
Yeah, we typically do put it in the next packet and vote to approve it
Okay.
as the presentation. So yes. Okay, the next thing on our list are the AP warrants, and we have 4 of them tonight. Would someone like to make a motion?
I move to approve AP warrant number 1,230 in the amount of $237,295.41 to be paid from the general fund.
And is there a second? Marcia? Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments? Cheryl?
Just a quick comment regarding that warrant, the very last item. When I saw this in the packet, the Mascoma Savings Bank stop payment fee, that was a mistake on the part of the bank, that it should not have been charged to the town. And that already has been reversed today in our bank account. So just to give you a heads up on that. And
That's the 1,234.
it's the $20 on the page 9 of 9 of that first warrant.
On the 20
$20.
With that, are you
You're looking
saying
at
that
the
we should
actual-
change the amount of our motion?
I think at the time this was done, that the $20 was deducted, but I just wanted you to know that it is, I don't know what you do in this case. I just wanted you to know that it's been reversed as of today and it's back in the bank account.
Okay, I think we'll leave it and then
Yeah.
allow
Yeah.
the finance office to do what they do.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. If there's no comments or questions, Mary, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Marcia?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Okay, next warrant.
I move to approve AP warrant number 1232 in the amount of $8,918.41 to be paid from Fund Number 12 Reappraisal Fund.
Second.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, Mary, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Marcia?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Okay. The next one, please.
I move to approve AP warrant number 1233 in the amount of $26.50 to be paid from the general fund.
Second.
Thank you. Questions or comments? None, Mary, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Marcia?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Okay, and the last one?
I move to approve AP warrant number 1234 in the amount of $783.33 to be paid from the general fund.
789.33.
Sorry, 789, what was it?
33.
33 to be paid from the general fund. Thanks for correction.
Yep.
Second.
Thank you. Questions or comments? Seeing none, Mary, how do you vote?
Vote yes.
Marcia?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Okay, I am signing these. I will pass these down to Mary and Marcia to sign. All right. So there are the warrants, if you would sign them, please. Okay. Next item on the agenda is the approval or the receipt of correspondence. Sorry, let me flip over to that. All right, the correspondence is an email from me talking about town council has been engaged to review the warrant articles in the past, and my finding was that no, that didn't happen last year. Priscilla has an email in for talking about employee evaluations. There's also an email from Priscilla talking about the office hours of the finance department when tax payments are due. And that is everything for correspondence. Is there a motion?
I move to accept all correspondence.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any questions, comments, discussion? Seeing none, Mary, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Marcia?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Okay, and then the approval of the January 22nd minutes. Is there a motion?
I have a comment.
Okay, go ahead.
Article 14, the citation, this is on page 3 of the minutes. It's actually 17 BSA 2646A, paren 1.
Okay, so it needs to be
Okay.
corrected.
So it's a small a, and then a small a, and then paren 1.
So we need to insert a small a before the paren a.
Right.
Okay. All right, any other changes? All right.
How should that be moved with that specific, just as amended, is that enough, or should it be more specific?
Just to amend Article 14.
Okay,
Statute.
Article 14,
Statutory citation in 14.
Statutory citation, okay. Any other?
So it would be amended to correct the statutory citation in Article 14.
Yes.
Okay,
You want to move that again?
I move to approve the January 22nd, 2025 minutes as amended to correct the Article 14 statutory citation.
Okay, so we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, Mary, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Marcia?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Okay. So that is the last thing on the agenda. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Mary, how do you vote?
Oh, I vote yes.
Marcia?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. We are adjourned at 9:05 p.m.
Take care.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.
Recording stopped.
Thanks, Brennan.
Yep. Thank you, guys.
And,
Have a good
um,
evening.